All right, so here's what, so Margaret and I thought, based on Saturday's call, what we thought we'd talk about a little bit about today is can be a hard conversation to have with yourself. It is one that when I provide some of the questions for you, it can be very hard to answer. And it really goes simply like this. Do you like yourself? What do you like about yourself? You know, it's in our society, in our environment, when we get with friends, you know, it's so easy to be self-critical, self-deprecating, judgmental of others and ourselves, right? And then we kind of, that energy we create between two people kind of sends us down this escalating hole. But it seems innocuous enough, right? But if we're unable to talk for 1 minute about one thing we appreciate in ourselves, how healthy or sustainable can that be for our well-being, right? And I challenge all of you right now in this time of isolation, a time of no distraction, a time of not running ourselves rugged on the roads, meeting people, going places, doing things. You know, I would say our biggest fear right now that we don't even realize are our own thoughts, right? And how loud they are. Mm-hmm. And when you can't sit there and talk for 1 minute about yourself in a appreciative way all the time, how genuine are your compliments of others, right? Or are you just self-fulfilling that prophecy of feeding your self-critical, self-deprecating thoughts of others, right? Because remember, we talk about the narrative or language that we have in our head is bound by our language that we say out loud or we say inside. So it's constantly going back and forth, right? So do you, on a daily basis, you know, we talk about learning your language as one of the 4 pillars. And some of the things we ask you to build, you know, bring out are really self-criticisms, right? I mean, like they're simple. Should I be working more? Or are other people more effective at work than I am? Am I wasting my time? Am I being lazy? Oh, I'm being too lazy. Oh, I hate that picture of me. How many of you have done that? Right? I mean, I'm classic for me doing that. Even today, I'm not talented enough. I'm not fit enough. I don't look good enough. I'm not likable enough. I'm not good enough for that person. We say, this is a good one. I'm an introvert as a negative. Some people will go, I'm extroverted, and that's a negative. I know people who have grown up their whole life being super smart, and they use the word, I'm a nerd, but they don't say it in a positive way. They're actually being self-deprecating because that's what they grew up to say it, and I know that, right? Some of you may say, or you can fill in this blank, I'm not good enough, blank, 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 right? So we're fulfilling that self-fulfilling prophecy of filling our subconscious brain that 95% of our thoughts come from of things that are negative, things that we don't like about others and we don't like about ourselves. But remember, it all comes from self first. You know, if we truly want to do our best work on ourselves, we have to do that from a place of non-judgment, right? We can't be judgment. We can't do it from a place of personal scarcity, right? Remember, we talked about bound nature and these non-serving emotions we have. Well, self-judgment would be one, right? Scarcity is one. Low self-esteem. Am I ever going to be good enough for someone or for that or for it? Especially in work. I'll get into a little bit of my story. You know, it sounds cheesy in a way, but what if we started our next conversation with someone? More importantly, what if we started our own conversation of, can I do this, or can I do this out of love for myself? Okay? And I use that statement to tie us back into our other conversation we had the other day about self-love, right? How do we achieve self-love, right? These two things work hand in hand. You know, another question. What is the ultimate measurement for action? What is the ultimate measurement for action that I can achieve so I like myself more? What can I do? Right? How can I build an attitude out of love for myself? Or I like this one. How can I build an attitude of love around eating about myself? Like eating, right? That's a huge one. How many people here have self-criticized themselves by what they put in their mouth? Oh, or self-critical of the stuff they drink. Like, I drank too much. Or I didn't exercise enough. Or I'm resting too much. Or I stayed at that job way too long. Or I didn't leave it fast enough. Or refusing to do something for someone else and then you feel guilty, right? There's so many things we do, but when we start changing the vernacular, we start almost sounding selfish at our core. But are we? I ask you, I challenge you, right? You know, let me tell you one that's very prominent, or was very prominent in my life. And I'll be honest, it would be a struggle if I didn't do the work all the time. And for me, it's called imposter syndrome, all right? And it's a bound nature trait that I've carried for a long time. And let me describe it a little bit for you. Do you ever feel yourself, feeling that you have no idea what you're doing, that you're a fake, and that any accomplishments that you have is a fake ideal of what you are? That's how I felt for a long time, of being successful in my business and in health, right? I didn't believe I was worthy of accomplishments. So because I didn't believe, I didn't like myself, right? I didn't like that I was good at something that other people perceived or judged me because it wasn't a Harvard degree or something. Like, I judged myself because I was always worried, or I thought that someone who was going to be more competent would expose me, right? And that was huge for me for a long time. For some, these can be huge career limitations, and I know so many people who have them, right? Because in some way, when we don't love ourselves in some capacity, when it goes unchecked, it keeps us applying for promotions. It keeps us from going and doing things that make ourselves better, even though we already perceive ourselves as good. Or more importantly, this is an important one, we don't want to call attention to ourselves, right? Like, even the job that we have, dependent of where we are, can be regarded as conservative. It can be regarded as I don't want to show my face. Like, I tell this story that I was denied a date because of selfies on my Facebook page. Now, if the person knew who I was and knew all the things about me, but that everyone else knows, they would know how hard that was for me, because it was a business move. Second, it put myself out there when I never did that because I never wanted to call attention to myself. Like, there was so much strength in that, right? Like, by the way, if Margaret ever told her story on how the steps that went to put her face on Facebook page, you would all know the strength of it.
Yeah.
Right? Remember how I celebrated that day, Margaret?
Yeah, it was awesome. I'm
right?
on Facebook because of Chris. Thank you.
No.
I had an account, but no picture, no profile, no nothing.
Totally. Yeah. And then I think it went to a picture, like not a picture of you, like a cartoon picture, and then it went to a picture. Like, it was like stages. It was awesome. So, when I was first trying to deal with, my imposter syndrome, when I was mentored into understanding what it was, all I realized I was doing, I was just in comparative syndrome, right? I was comparing myself to other people. And I was comparing myself, and this is important when we want to love ourselves, because when we don't put ourselves out there, when we don't, when we perceive we don't like each other, we are in comparative against someone else generally, right? For me in work, it's that I wasn't confident, or I didn't feel like I had my shit together around people I compared myself to. So I wasn't like I was comparing myself to my neighbor. It was like I was comparing myself to like the epitome of who I wanted to be in business, right? And even if I tried to mimic their confidence or how I was feeling deep down inside, I still would wonder if I belong there because I was judging myself. But then as I've gotten to know people, important people, people who've been famous, you know, I just understood that we just judge ourselves against people, our heroes, the people we resonate with, the people we feel are better looking than us, more fit than us, speak better than us, have better degrees than us. And if you just sat them down, and this, I swear, this is how I view this. If you've ever watched The Walking Dead, this is why I love The Walking Dead, because it puts the really smart people, the people who work in the gas stations, the people who work in Starbucks, the people who've made millions of dollars, and you put them in a community, and you're all just a person, right? And what is different? What's different, right? The difference between me and someone who exudes confidence is that they just make statements of their confidence, right? They start believing it because they're telling the narrative in their head. They own their accomplishments, even how small, right? There's this really good speaker that I've worked with, and he's made a lot of money, and I thought it was because he was a millionaire. Well, he happened to be on that show, where the show where they dress up and with their employees and then they give them a check at the end. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, but I can't think of the name.
Okay. Well, anyway, he was on that show, and he rode that show for years, right? Because he was a great speaker. He taught people how to speak. That was his accomplishment. He talks about it every day, like it's like happened every day. But I judge myself on that, right? So I thought less of myself. When I sat with him at dinner, I was like, dude, you from Podunk, Pennsylvania? You got cut from your basketball team? You don't have a girlfriend? You can't keep a friend? Like just a normal human being. But he got over imposter syndrome because he just had confidence in this one thing he did. And he was just humble. He was humble in a way, but he was a great closer, right? He talked about it. He was comfortable with it. It didn't happen overnight, but he committed to seeing himself as awesome from this small town guy. And that's how for him, that's how he started self-love. You know, the Margaret can chime in here in a second, but the question is how do we start getting to self-love? Well, I asked this question on Saturday, and I'll ask all of you today. There are many things, but if you had to list one thing, write down one thing that I would say is your untouchable trait that defines you for all the beautiful qualities you are, what is that? And when I was asked that question, that was really hard for me, right? It's because I had to face myself in the mirror and tell myself what I loved about myself. And at that point, I really didn't, but how did I get there? I did the 4 pillars. I know it's ad nauseum for you guys, but that's the basis of everything we start with and end with. I understood the language that I had. Every day, I looked at all those self-critical remarks I made, and I flipped them, right? Well, if I didn't feel I was good at business, how am I good at business, right? I built my self-confidence. I counted my wins every night. I found all the small things, okay, and this is important. I listed all the small things that were good about me in the day. Not in the day I saw. What were the little things I did during that day were great? That was really big for me. Then every day I reviewed my direction with those steps to self-love, of liking myself better. I reviewed it every single day. And at the end of every day, I imagined myself, how I felt when I loved myself. And this is how I did it. And this is true. I believed how you walk into a room can be felt by every single person in the room, even if they don't have their head up. Every time I walked into Starbucks, I believed that everyone was staring at me because of how I walked in that room. That's how I started that. I imagined that every time, and I practiced it every time because I go in there every day. That's how I started that process. I imagined that. I imagined my presence when I walked in a room, how people would view me, hear me, see me. It is a big, big way to start confidence in yourself. It doesn't matter your stature. You can be 5'2" and stand 8 foot tall. You can be 8 foot tall and be 5'2". And it is true. It's how you view your confidence in yourself. How you walk into a room can start that confidence just by how you stand in your own presence. Margaret, you need to start talking a little bit.
No, that's really good. I remember the first time that actually happened to me. I had been up at an event in Connecticut, and I was just immersed in a group of people who really were just speaking life into us. Like it was just it was one of those mountaintop moments, right? You know, and then you come back down to reality. But it's okay, because in that moment, being immersed for about 6 days with people who did love themselves and were telling everyone else around them how amazing they were. I remember driving down I-95, and you know, if y'all have ever been in Delaware, you know that big rest stop that's right there. It's the only one you can go to. It's on both sides of the road, you know. Anyway, I remember walking into that place, having the exact same experience you had at Starbucks. I was so like aware of this love and this life that I was in me. Like I really loved myself at that moment for the first time. I mean, it's the first time I ever remember feeling it that way, and realizing that I am projecting this out of me. Like like I just felt big. I don't know how else to describe it. It was an amazing feeling. I mean, it faded, you know, you come home and you get back into reality, it fades, but then you do that pillar work. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to kind of summarize and recap what the steps that Chris was describing. First of all, the 4 pillars, for those of you who are new, and I know, Lisa, you've put your request in for Freedom's Neighborhood. Chris will let you in that group. But the 4 pillars are basically, you count your wins every day. You learn your language, you journal every day, you write what's in your head, you get it on a page, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. You got to get it out to see what's going on in that subconscious narrative. Then you review, well, I won't go into all of them, but then you review your do direction review every day. And then imagination theater, you imagine the outcome of the goal you're setting. And what's different about this goal, and we talked about this last time, this isn't a weight loss goal. This isn't a relationship goal with someone else or something else. This is like the ultimate goal. This is you put self-love in there, and then you run those 4 pillars with self-love being the motivator, being the goal behind it. So I loved what you said when you mentioned your 10 wins. These aren't 10 wins like weight loss wins. I mean, they can be, but this was, you know, how was I honoring myself? How was I loving myself? How was I being authentic to myself? How was I allowing my voice to be heard? These are all things about yourself. So the process is, you want to deconstruct those negative mindsets about yourself so that you can reconstruct the positive. And I wanted just to add with that deconstruction piece, and I totally cheated. I went on to a psychology website to get some of this stuff. And basically they said that, some of the reasons people don't like themselves is not because they don't have good traits about them, but maybe they look in the mirror and they're like, oh, I don't like the gray hair that I see, or I don't like the weight around my legs, or I don't like, or maybe you didn't get the promotion at work or whatever, but you'll weight those experiences and those observations more heavily than the positive. So That's one thing to be aware of. You end up weighting the negative higher than the other. The other may be, and we mentioned this the last time, family member. You might find a trait in yourself and you're like, oh, it's just like my mother, or it's just like my father. And maybe you don't like that. Or maybe my uncle does that, or my grandmother did that. And you judge them, but then you start to see it in yourself. And now you're judging yourself. By the way, all of these have to do with self-judgment. We've talked about that before as well. Have you done something that you're ashamed of, or you feel guilty over, or you're embarrassed about? Did you fail, or did you think you failed? And now there's shame and guilt. We had a great talk on that, 2 weeks ago, maybe, guilt and shame. Those things can cause you to not like yourself, to be judging yourself. And then Chris mentioned this too, just judging ourselves against cultural norms, against, do I have that degree when everyone around me seems to? Do I, do I look the way everyone around me is supposed to look? Do I use the right language? Do I drive the right car? Do I, whatever, however you define it, that's going to be your culture, your surroundings. Whatever do I have the Martha Stewart home? I said that to my girls the other day and they're like, who's Martha Stewart? I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. Love it. They know who the Kardashians are, but they don't know who Martha Stewart is. But anyway, so it's all about judgment. So how and why are you judging yourself? So you want to expose those areas of judgment, and that's what that learning your language does. And then the other biggie, this is why when I work with people, I always start with these two, is the counting your wins. It's just in a type of appreciation. And what I find for some of us, and this is part of my story, there's no way you could tell me to start with myself. It wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. So I needed to start with things outside of myself to appreciate and to like. And so I remember sitting down, this was years ago, this was how bound up I was. If you had asked me what I liked, I couldn't have even told you. I mean, I liked things, that wasn't the issue. I just had no self-awareness of the things I liked, because I just let other people take the lead. Other people were quicker to the draw. So I was like, well, what do you want for dinner? Oh, I don't know. Like, as I'm thinking about it, someone else I'm like, okay, we'll just do that. So I remember sitting down, and y'all heard my story about the brownies with nuts. I like brownies I literally had to make a list of things that I like. And just to start to develop and cultivate some self-awareness around who am I? That's not even liking me. That was just me liking things outside of myself, but it's okay. It's a start. It's a spectrum of it's steps on the path. So if you are like me, then maybe you can't start with just, what do I like about myself? Okay, well, what do I like? What are other things I like? As you get better at that, it's just like the counting wins. It's training your brain to look to things like that. Then you can start being more intentional about saying, okay, what do I like about me? And now I can do it. But at the time, I couldn't. I mean, at the time, my list was things like brownies, like nuts. It was things like tea. It was sunshine and beaches and the smell of salt air. I loved all that stuff. But, and then it moved to things like, I like the fact that I see the big picture. Ironically, the things I actually love the most about myself are things that I have been the most judged for, which I think is fascinating, because I do see the big picture. And so I see things that other people miss. And what I realized is when I would say it, because other people missed it, they would be judging themselves. But since it's not comfortable to judge yourself, you judge other people. So I would get lashed out at for picking up on things that other people missed. Now I realize, oh my gosh, that's one of my greatest strengths. But I couldn't see that at the time. So it's a process, no matter where you are, just baby steps.
It is, Margaret. I think what you said is brilliant. It's another way to put it, I think, is stop holding yourself to ideals of perfection that you wouldn't expect from anyone else.
Right.
Right? And those shrieking insults of judgment from other people, and everyone, you need to understand this, especially if this is your first time hearing, that's more of a reflection of how that person views themselves than anything it has to do with you. Right? You held the mirror up to them and they don't know how to handle it. So they're handling it by reaction. Right? Remember, last on Saturday, we talked about some people react and some people withdraw. Same reaction. Some of it's outwardly, some of it's inwardly. It's the same thing. It's just how that person chooses to do it. When you made some great points, like this is great. You look in the mirror and you see gray hair. Okay, this is where learn your language is really important, folks. You don't out there and go, oh, gray hair. You're saying it, but you don't even realize you're saying it. That's the crazy thing. You're like, oh, more. Like you're saying it, but you don't hear yourself saying it. That's learn your language at its core, right? You're like, oh, judging your appearance. You're not saying it verbally, generally, it's inside, but because you're thinking it, it's so down, you don't even realize it. And that's the beauty of when you get really good at learn your language. That was such a great point, the gray hair in the mirror. Yeah. Such a good point. Wow. I did that this morning.
Oh no.
I only get gray hair on the right side of my body.
There we go.
Chris, I think we're all having this problem right now.
I think so.
I was like, I have white hair everywhere, like all of it.
Yeah, exactly.
The first thing my father said the other day when he saw me, they live in Israel. He's like, go color your hair. I'm like, seriously? That's the first thing you taught me?
Oh, that's funny.
So yeah.
Well, at least if your siblings, I mean, I don't know if you have siblings, but if your siblings tell you, that's even worse. And
yeah,
it's even something else. I have someone who very dear to me. She's like, with blonde hair, you have to wear makeup. Go put some lipstick on because you look pale. I'm like, I look just fine. I am divine. I'm just fine. Don't even. But it didn't offend me because I was just like thinking it through. It's like, but I did color my hair. Yay, wins.
And the key in all of this, it doesn't matter what people decide to do or not do or whatever. The key is the judgment piece. I mean, we're going to sound like broken records because there's not the principle, the underlying principles are just the same. How you choose to apply them will be as varied as there are people on the planet. But the principles at play here are identical, and they work whether you're, like you said, whether you're going for self-love or whether you're going for losing weight or whether you're whatever it is. And one thing that I'm sure a lot of us have picked up on, but I know Chris and I have, just because we've been working with people for so long, the narratives, the belief systems, the self-talk, honestly, is universal. It really doesn't matter if you're talking with a CEO of a company who, by worldly standards, is uber successful. And it doesn't matter if you're talking to someone who's totally unemployed and doesn't seem to have their act together. They still have the same doubts about their abilities. They still have the same guilt and still the same shame. They still have the same judgments. It may just be in different areas of their life, and culturally we value certain things over the others, but it's still there. No one seems to be exempt. I'm not saying that because I want everyone to be in the pit. I want everyone to get out of the pit, but we all have our pits that we're in. So just like you said, when you went to dinner with this person and you realized, oh my gosh, the key is we create hierarchies in our mind, And we think they're up here and we're down there, and they really aren't. We're all on an equal playing field, both all over. In greatness, we're on equal playing field, but also in our crappy thinking, we're on the same playing field. It's just the way it works out. So to create a hierarchical system that you then judge yourself by doesn't make any sense. And the more, like I said, the more we do this, the more I do this, I just see it. Like it's easier and easier for me not to judge myself, because I'm no longer comparing myself against other people. Because I'm realizing, oh my gosh, there's no reason to. One, there's just no competition in the first place. But even if there were, we're really all in the same boat. So it's just, I'm going to save you the trouble. Just don't go there.
It's The Walking Dead. Like I said, we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, I'll have to watch that movie. I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's great.
Is it good? Okay.
It's not great for the zombies. It's just great for the human interaction of people all together to live with each other. It's just fantastic.
And that's actually one thing I do like about competition and sporting teams is they just, it does bring people together in a way that maybe they wouldn't be otherwise, or teams, I should say. So, well, any questions so far? Kind of we've been on a roll the last week. We hit something that just felt big. And I don't know if I shared this last time, but I get little synchronicities all the time. It happens all the time, which is fun. So Chris and I decided last week we're going to do self-love. Last week I did speaking of self-love or self-like, there's a guy I know, and he's into what I call biohacking. He's into like really pushing your body extremely. And I first got into it myself because of Lyme. I realized if I could push myself, and it just, it created resiliency and strength in my body that was helpful in my recovery. But he's into like cold immersion. He's into fasting. He's into breath work. He's into, I don't know, all kinds of, anyway, all kinds of crazy stuff. So last week he's like, hey guys, if anyone wants to join me, I'm going to do this 12-week, or this, I'm going to do a week, and I only want 12 of you. So if 12 of you want to join me, come join me. I'm like, all right, Arun, I'll do it with you. So last week, 12 of us, Arun took us through 12 days of doing crazy, or I keep saying 12 days, there's 12 of us, 7 days of doing crazy stuff. So I've been taking ice baths for the last 12 days, and oh my gosh. But why am I saying that? Because as I'm doing it, like, or let me back up, the synchronicities first. So Chris and I decide to do self-love. The next thing I know, Arun is like, listen guys, I know I'm torturing you, but this really is all about self-love. And I'm like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. So he goes on and talks about self-love for the next 30 minutes. I'm like, okay, that was confirmation number one. Number two is we're recording. Oh, whatever, who cares? I like tuning forks, and I like doing tuning fork sessions on people because I found that to be a very powerful modality for actually deconstruction. It just helps to get rid of some of the stuck emotional energy. And anyway, I have a friend who's been very, very sick, and she was developing some neuropathy in her hand. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll do a tuning fork session on you, and you can do them remotely. And she goes, you know what? And I've done them with her before, but they've always been on physical things. And she goes, you know what? I actually think I need you to do it on self-love. She goes, that's what I need. So within 24 hours from totally different sources, I'm getting hit with, we need to talk about self-love. So so that's part of why we're doing, and then we did it, and then we're like, you know what, there's a lot of there, so let's just keep going. So we shifted a little bit to liking ourselves. But even that's huge, because honestly, 6 months ago or a year ago, I wouldn't have told you I was into tuning forks. Because I'm so conditioned. My family of origin is so I don't want to use the word hostile, but it is sort of hostile. They just, they kind of roll their eyes at some of the things that I enjoy. They're like, really, oh golly, you're not going to tell anybody that, are you? And now I'm like, well, maybe I will.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell it on Facebook, and we're going to record it and publish it. But that took doing the work over years to get to that place. But anyway.
No, it's a perfect example. And Margaret, it goes to talking about religion to other people, how they feel about it. It goes to you posting on Facebook, your Facebook status with your face. Everyone has a process. Like, I would have never in a million years have posted stuff I wrote on Facebook ever. Mm-hmm. I would have never told my story that I couldn't wake up in the morning with the lights on. We all have our stuff, and to start loving yourself, the truth comes out in the little things that you start doing that you never did before. And the ability to feel that freedom or those boulders off your shoulders. I mean, there is a lot to say when that happens, that personal freedom when it finally happens. And the best way, if you haven't felt it, the best way to think about it is if you had to have a tough conversation with someone, you finally have it, and the release you feel from having it done, that's what you feel when you start loving yourself and you start doing these things for yourself and saying the things for yourself, free of not caring how people judge you or what they say about you. Now, there'll always be new areas that you can work on, but your growth will be exponential as you start taking those stepping stones and creating that new path for yourself, no matter what it is, whether it's going out with friends, going to a party, whether it's putting yourself out there and start dating, whether it's applying for that job that you want to do, but you never felt you were good enough to do. It's going to the interview. It's speaking in front of a group. It's huge for a lot of people. Some people really want to speak in front of people, but once you do it, there's a lot of relief from it. Maybe a lot of stress at the same time, but there's a lot of relief. There's confronting your parents when you never have at any age.
Right.
There's so many areas that go through this, but at the base of all of that would get you to the top of those 4 pillars and start understanding yourself and why. It is the basis of your self-love, your self-worth, your growth, your ascension, your ability to live your life on your terms and be able to get through the things when life happens. It's all there. It's all there for the taking. You have to A, want it, and then B, you have to do the work. And remember, it's simple work, but you have to do the work as well.
Because you start with yourself. You don't, you can start wherever you want to, but for some of us, we do need those stepping stones. So the key is to start with there's stuff that's hidden, get it exposed. And the first place to do that is with yourself, with that journaling, with the learning your language. And then find a next step could be finding someone safe. And we've offered this up before. Find someone safe that you can practice with, because it's not to get to the place of complete freedom. I think now this is an idealistic view, is to have 100% of you 100% publicly exposed. Like, if you can be good in that place, you can be good anywhere. But okay, that's this end of the spectrum. This end of the spectrum is you're totally hidden. And I know for me, there were parts of my life that were totally hidden. And so that first step is to reveal it, get it out from hiding, first and foremost to myself. Then to try to find safe groups, safe people, safe person that you can share that with. And then you move down the spectrum. And then eventually, if you feel led, if you feel like you want to go that far, not everyone wants to, that's okay. Then you go public. And there really is a freedom. I mean, part of why we aren't here is because when we've seen totally free people, what do? We judge them. But in judging them, we're actually putting limitations on ourselves. We're making it difficult. We've just told a part of ourselves, hey, it's not safe to go there because you're going to be judged, and not judged outwardly, judged inwardly. So another key is to, when you see people who are totally free, like when you read Chris's Facebook page, don't judge it. Don't judge his selfies. Don't judge his language. Don't judge, I'll use the Kardashians because that came up in my car ride yesterday. I spent 8 hours in my car with my daughters. We talked about a lot. We listened to a lot of music. That was fun. But, don't judge the Kardashians. Just let them be who they are, and just they are who they are, right? So non-judgment along the way is huge too, because that's what puts you in hiding in the first place. And judging other people actually puts you in hiding. If there's judgment anywhere, there's going to be judgment in you. You're not going to be judging other people unless you're judging yourself first. They just go hand in hand. So that's another thing with that language. As you're learning your language, if you find you're being critical of someone else, it's probably because you've criticized yourself at some point along the way. And back to our 4 stages of learning, you're not going to get to a place where you're naturally not judgmental right away. That's okay. The first stage is that unconscious incompetence, consciously incompetent, consciously competent, and then the unconsciously competent. So you're not going to get there. Just live in the conscious place for a while. Just keep practicing it, and then you'll realize eventually, oh my gosh, it's happening. It's sticking. We used this analogy the other day. At least I think we did, or maybe it was just when you and I were talking. It's like cranking the old-fashioned cars. You crank it until the engine gets started. In the beginning, you have to crank. So if you stop before the car started, you will backslide. But if you keep cranking, eventually the engine gets started and you don't have to keep cranking anymore. Or we use the analogy of surfing. In the beginning, you do have to paddle. And if you stop, you're going to miss the wave. But if you keep paddling, eventually you'll catch the wave. And then you don't have to paddle anymore. So do the work, and you do it, and then eventually you don't have to. But it's a process, and there's no judgment. If you're cranking, no judgment in cranking. It's okay. Cranking's good. Cranking's what gets your engine started. If you're paddling, that's okay. Don't judge the paddling. You're just doing what you're doing until you ride the wave. So, I mean, everyone who's ridden the wave paddled at some point. Everyone whose car is started, they cranked at some point. It's okay. So, anyway.
Woo. Any questions? Thoughts? Really? Well.
I have a question.
Go for it.
So, someone complimented the answers I gave them in regards to my professional life. And I don't know why I gave this comment, and I want to see if that's my bound nature thing speaking or not. And so they said you gave the best answers and so on and so forth. And then I said, yeah, I can be smart sometimes, but sometimes I shy away. I felt like I was being humble, but then I questioned myself. I was like, maybe I'm thinking too much. I shouldn't be thinking too much about it. But I mean,
Mary, say thank you.
Yeah, I should have just, yeah. And later I was like, I should have just said thank you. But why did I say that? Is that my bound nature speaking?
Yeah. It's self-confidence. It's questioning yourself. It's whatever term you want to use it for. I'm not saying it's not wrong, but in society we're a lot of times we're taught to deflect compliments, right? Like if I gave a compliment to a woman and said, wow, you're really beautiful, you know, you could instantly see how that compliment goes. They either say thank you, or it's like this retreat and they don't know how to respond to it. It's no different than when we give someone a compliment for work or for work done. If you're not used to accepting compliments because you can't give them out from a place of saying it without expectation. Remember we talked about expectations. Then there's this bound nature little bit of comes out on you a little bit. You know, when I give compliments, I can say them so freely without feeling people are judging me, because I truly believe it. And I've told the story. I learned to do that by telling people at the grocery store, at Starbucks, wherever I went, that I loved their name. Like I would tell them to pronounce their name to me. I say, wow, that's a really beautiful name. And I learned to do it that way. So I became more confident to be able to accept a compliment, be able to give it as well in that aspect.
Yeah, because
you're practicing a skill, just like playing a sport. You know, you're practicing, or in Chris, your case, pitching, for example, you're practicing, like practice saying thank you, or practice, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes we've just been conditioned and we just need to, it's that deconstructing and reconstructing. So if you find that is your default and that happens, just, you can practice, you know, saying thank you. I've done that before.
yeah.
Just, yeah. Or even just like, you're welcome, or yeah, whatever.
I did say, oh, I liked the questions. They were challenging. I said that, but then they said something else. And I said, oh yeah, I can be smart. I was saying it, just trying to think, yeah, as Chris said, trying to just dim it down, but then at the same time, I'm like saying, yeah, I am smart. You know, I don't know. So I was just like trying to be aware. Is that like, yeah, so it does sound that way too.
Yeah, it's just like when I just talked about in here, when we, you know, the accomplishments that we have, it doesn't matter how many or how few, own it. You know, own the accomplishment.
Yeah.
You know, I like to speak to people or speak out into groups, and like I love it. It took me a long time to get over the judgment of myself that people would challenge me on what I would say, because I didn't believe in myself. But it's just something I've had to practice, just as I've had to practice when you're in an argument with someone, not to go into my bound nature traits of retreating, and how to talk my way out of that in a very sweet and constructive and kind manner. Like I had to practice that in my head and out loud, so I become better at it when the moment happens, because they're going to happen.
Because here's the deal, you can have a mindset shift, but then we've got patterns that have been programmed that are in our bodies. So there's a 1-2 piece there. You've got to, you can shift it mentally, but then you still have to shift it. There's a lag, if you will, sometimes. And it can work in reverse too. Sometimes you shift it physically and then the mind that changes. But there's a cycle there. So you want to practice both. But and Chris, you and I didn't talk about this, so feel free to, he and I can disagree on things. But I'm going to go ahead and offer something up that was huge for me that I discovered years ago. And I just want to offer this up for consideration. It's everywhere. It's everywhere in our culture. This idea that you have to earn respect. And I remember I live across the street from a middle school, and there was a poster, and I years ago I was walking by, and it said something about these kids needing to earn respect. And then just something in me, just literally, I almost yelled, and I don't even know why I did this, but I almost just yelled out, no. Something in there felt really off to me about that statement, and I didn't know why right away. So I pulled on the string because I had such a visceral response to it. And now I know why. Because I have special needs family members. I have, in my extended family, anyway, the culturally, we have this idea that people have to earn your respect. And if you have to earn respect, do you have to earn it, or is it your nature to be respectable and to respect other people? Can I respect you? Can I honor you? Pick your word. Even if you're not behaving honorably, even if you're not behaving respectably. And the conclusion I had to personally come to was, of course I do. So you don't have to earn honor for me to honor you. You don't have to earn respect for me to respect you, because for that to be the standard is grossly unfair to people. I have a nephew who has Down syndrome, and he does a lot of things that aren't respectable, but I don't have to. I choose to respect him anyway. I had twin nieces who actually died. They were conjoined, and they had done nothing in their life to be respectable. In fact, culturally, they were absolutely despised, truthfully. And yet they were deserving of honor and respect. I had a nephew who had actually amazingly, that's another amazing testimony, but he was on the autistic spectrum and has recovered. But these are people that our culture tends to shun, and are we respectable just because of who we are as human beings? Because we're these amazing, beautiful people, creatures, I believe, with divinity inside of us, just waiting to come out. Like, or do you have to do something in order to earn it? So when I got that anchored in my soul, when I realized, oh my gosh, we're just amazing, regardless of what we do. You could lay in bed all day long. You could be on life support and you've done nothing, but you're still worthy of honor and worthy of respect. When I flipped that narrative in my head, it was a game changer for me. That was when I could start seeing anybody and everyone as just beautiful. Like there was nothing they had to do for me to think any more highly of them. In fact, I've gotten myself in trouble because I've said some things about people who historically are really pretty despicable people. We would say that. Our history would call them that. And I'm like, you know what? I bet there was a beauty inside of them that they never realized was there. And then in fact, just yesterday, someone said, Mom, you can't say that publicly. I said, I actually know I can't, because it wouldn't be received. It wouldn't be understood. But this notion of, it all started with that sign, reading that sign, and something in me saying no to it and realizing what it was, and realizing that no, we are all worthy of respect regardless. And that was when a huge narrative flipped for me. So I wanted to we didn't talk about that. I wasn't expecting to talk about that, but then it felt really important to me. So I shared it.
I'm going to say something. I like how you brought this up, the culture of you have to earn your respect. Somebody actually said that to me, a manager.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere in our culture.
No, they were actually literally telling me that, I said, this person is being disrespectful to me. And the manager told me, you have to earn your respect.
We're taught that you have to earn your respect.
Yeah.
And I know we're being taught it because this poster was in a middle school being held up as wisdom.
Yeah, it has become a universal truth for some of us. And afterwards I thought to myself, I said, no, I give respect even to that person who did not respect me. I still didn't disrespect that person. So then I was like, respectful people would respect others regardless.
Yeah.
But, our society, our role models, like, just look at the debates that we have. Aren't those the most awful, humiliating things? and we broadcast it. Oh, it's the debate. This is the right way of living, and it's not. We come on TV and we demean each other just to win a position, and that's how our workplaces are. That's how our workplaces are at this time. We have to demean another person in order to keep our position. Otherwise, we are going to lose it. And believe me, I have experienced that.
We've all experienced that. And that's why we're doing this work, is to realize it starts with us, to deconstruct that, you know, because if some of us can start changing the tide, start flipping it, and start, like, think about this. If you can honor and respect and love someone at their worst, then they might, I don't know, maybe they'll start believing it for themselves. I mean, because it is there, it is what we do, but that doesn't mean that that's what we have to keep doing. It just means we're swimming upstream in the interim, but that's okay.
Right. Just remember that we are accountable for how we respond and react. So when someone comes at us in that tone or with that vernacular, it is up to us, being the more mindful person of what that person is coming at us with, that we can see them better than they can see themselves. So we know how to handle that in a way, and we are able to do that because we have done the work on ourselves to move through that. I'm not saying it doesn't trigger us and to do those type of things, but society and the influence of society and how that plays on so much of our mindset as a culture, as a world, is huge. But we can be accountable for how we handle ourselves in that point.
Like, do you have an example, a better example of how you would respond to that in a, you know, I mean, I know you have given me good examples before, so I like to hear your in a professional setting.
If someone came at me like that, I would be like, why do I need to earn your respect? I mean, how's it any different the other way around if I turned it that way around? Do you know what I mean? I said, for me to be able to sit here and respect you for how you're treating me, and I'm respecting you for your views and your views on mine, I shouldn't have to change myself to earn someone else's respect. That's just not how I view this situation. You know what I mean? And by the way, when we talk about the circle of influence, sometimes that circle, we have to do what's best for us in that situation. Sometimes that's removing ourselves from that situation. Sometimes that's
I love that job.
But still, there is a,
because you're honoring yourself.
Here's a good thing: you confronting the self-respect, you're setting a boundary against the attack. That's respect in itself. Do you know what I mean? Just holding your boundary as a person is respect in itself.
Because the first person you need to respect is yourself. So yeah, if you need to put boundaries up, that's okay. You know, you might even want to ask them what they mean by respect. You know, because people might have different definitions of that. You know, you said you need to earn it. Like,
that's a great point. If you're on the streets of Brooklyn, you know, is that beating someone up? Is that robbing someone to earn someone's respect? Is it in the business world? Is it steamrolling a small business and taking everything from someone? You know, that's a great point. What is respect then? You know, it depending on your social economic factor where you are, just like it is when we judge when we judge ourselves against others, it is where you're judging yourself in that moment. Is it sticking up for yourself? Is it being in a professional sports and getting in a fight with the star athlete just to earn respect, which sounds stupid, but that's our culture, right? So that's a good point, Margaret. It's a great point.
Thank you.
A long call.
You're disentangling it from the person versus, you know, because should we behave, in a way that's helpful, and, or in a job situation, you want to do things that are well done, for example, but that's different than judging the person, or putting a judgment on the character, the nature of the person. Does that make sense? Like, I can assess and evaluate someone's work, or, whatever, a paper, if my kids are in school, that's one thing, but then to make it personal is different. So that's why I'm saying, maybe tease out what do they mean? Is this a work performance issue, or is this a me issue? I mean, those are different things. So,
Good question. That's a good question.
yeah. Any thoughts or comments on anything we've talked about so far? It's already been an hour. It's usually our time. They're just baby steps you can take, or jump in the deep end. Take your pick. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this was great. I actually, you kind of did separate it for me a little bit. Yeah, is it work performance, or is it the person? Because, yeah, those are two different things. And if you're here to do work, so that's what you should be.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
All
good.
right. So Wednesday at 11. Okay. If anyone wants to join.
And just keep paying attention to the times, because Thursdays may be we may change that up, and we may change up Saturdays too. We're still working out the details on that. So just bear with us. We're going to find times that work, hopefully for everyone, but just pay attention. Don't just put it on your calendar and forget about it. Pay attention to the time, because that's still TBD.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.